Hi guys, how are you? This is Kai Santusi, and today I'm here with a huge comic book writer, and now it's 11 a.m. in UK time and 7 a.m. to me. I woke up very early, but it worth it because I'm here with who I consider a legend, who worked with Shade, HellBlazer, American Ronin, and X-Men, and more a lot of repeat this part. Mr. Milligan, how are you in
I'm
this
good.
beautiful day?
Is it a beautiful day?
That's perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
It no, actually, is dark yet because it's early, so it's not
What time is it in?
sunrise, and
What time is it in Brazil?
it's now 7 a.m.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
so the sun will appear at some point,
Okay.
so it could be a beautiful day or not. I don't know.
Okay.
Mr. Milligan, who don't know you, who are you?
My name is Peter Milligan. I'm from London, England. I've written comics for a number of years. I've written other things. I've written film scripts, but I'm mainly known for comic books, like Shade the Changing Man, Hellblazer. I've also written lots of independent companies. Well, I've written like ecstatics for Marvel, but I've also written for lots of independent stories like American Ronin for AWA. I'm writing lots of other things. So I think my comic books are known for being slightly weird, quite weird, and perhaps a bit dark. And the stuff I'm interested in is, I guess, the human experience. And I like to go dark, and I like to go weird, and I like to go where it hurts.
That's perfect. Yeah. So today I'll make some questions about your whole career, as I said,
Okay.
and starting with the your writing process, because we during this time that you've been working with comics, has it ever happened that you needed to deliver a script, but you were worn out and were afraid of not being able to deliver it in time, and so what advice do you have for someone who's starting to work in this area and suffers for something like this?
Okay, worn out. Well, I don't know about worn out. I think that we all sometimes in a career, sometimes you have a deadline that's a little bit
Yeah,
difficult. I think it's best to try to not get into that situation for sure. But I think that one trick, and it's difficult, particularly at the beginning, if we're talking about tips for the beginner, one 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 way of trying to avoid that is to really like what you're writing, to really try to only work on stories that you really dig, that you really
yeah,
like, that really means something to you. And it's amazing if a story means something to you and has a real kind of like you have a real connection to it. It's much easier to get up earlier. It's much easier to carry on working. The ideas come better when you really are into the story. When it's just a job, then it's harder because you're not
yeah,
so into it. And I think that the more of yourself that's in a story, the more easy it is to work hard on it. And I think that in terms of if you're talking about like if we're talking about like practical tips for writers, my tip is I think that some beginners they go too quickly into plot, into what happens,
yeah,
what happens now, what happens now. At the beginning, I'm more interested in why it happens. Why is this happening?
yeah,
What is this story about? What themes am I trying to explore? What am I trying to say? What's interesting to me? And if
yeah,
you really explore that and dig away at that, often you find that scenes and characters emerge from it organically. Whereas if you kind of just if it's just and then this happens, and then that happens, and then that happens, it becomes more like a soap opera, uh, and 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 which didn't have a lot of deep meaning or doesn't really have. Yeah, so that's one of my little tips for myself. I try
yeah,
to work on things that I'm really into.
yeah, perfect. And when you're making the why this story is happening, when you're working with a character that for example, is not in character, is a character that you're creating now. you have to, I don't know, you have to present himself, you have to present his oranges perhaps. So is it harder to make this kind of comic in this sense?
Oh, no, when you're making it up yourself.
Yeah.
See that when you're designing. Well, I think that you can't really separate. You can't really separate the character from the story.
Yeah.
I think they both come from the same place. I think that the character that emerges that you want to write should be a character that can best dramatize or personify the story you want to write. So these are
Yeah.
two separate things. Like you don't have a story and then try to, or sometimes you do, but it's probably not the good way to go about it. To have a story and then try to wedge in and push in this fucking story that you've made, this character that you've got. It's best that it emerges either from looking at the character. If you're really interested in the character, what's about this character? What kind of problems would this character have? What is it this character wants? What is about this character that's interesting? And have a story emerges from that. Or you can go the other way. What is it that's interesting about this story? What kind of character would best allow me to explore this story and explore the themes I want to
Yeah.
explore? So I think that if you do that, then the character and the story hopefully has a little bit of depth.
Yeah, that's perfect. Recently, I've made this kind of tips of writing is very important. And recently, I did the live with J.M. DeMatteis and Mark Wade, and I say to them that the 80s was the British invasion, right, in American comics, and in the 90s we had the image era. We had a some revolutions, and but that nowadays you don't see any movements happening in comics anymore. Do you, as a writer, believe that those days are behind and comics today have fallen into a formula and tradition that today
Did you say moments or movements?
movements?
Well, I mean, I think that it goes in cycles. I think you have little times when it seems to be. I think at the moment, comics are trying to find a little bit their voice, and I think that because of films, because of TV, because of all the other sort of media that comic books are up against, and also I think that one of the things which is affecting comics at the moment is this idea that we want to try and make a comic with an idea, with one eye on turning it into TV or one eye on turning it into a film. I think that can
Yeah.
impact on what kind of comic you write. I think that when we were doing the comics back in the Vertigo days, comics themselves, we worked on the basis that comic books were a valid art form. And I think that's what made Vertigo different. This
Yeah.
idea that comic books are a valid mode of expression. They're a valid art form, and you can, and the same kind of subjects or themes that you might explore in a novel or in a film. It's valid to explore that stuff in a comic book. And I think that that's what made that so-called British invasion and the Vertigo time so special. That's what made the stories stand out. And I think that's moved on a little bit now, but something else will come along at some point and replace it.
Yeah, yeah, that's perfect. That's interesting because, as I said, I am young, so I have started reading comics when these revolutions was not happening anymore. So this point of view is very important as a writer. That you're working with comics about 30 years now.
Almost, yeah, I guess, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that's really nice.
Uh,
This point of view,
mm.
and let's go to the next question. Let me say. So, still talking about this British occupation. Today, looking back, and what is like to you to see that you were part of this important movement in superhero comics, that is this so-called British occupation.
Well, I never ever think about it. The only time I ever talk about it or think about it is when people like you ask me about it. But
Yeah.
otherwise, I don't sit around thinking, British invasion. It's not like it doesn't happen that way. So it's, and also that was something which other people called it. We at the time we weren't really thinking about it like that. It's just that's what it was, to a large degree. So I mean, I think that but a lot of movements. I think a lot of our art movements, they weren't. It was other people later that kind of like coined phrases. I mean, existentialism. I think that I mean, Camus wasn't sitting around in cafes thinking, "God, I feel existentialist today." It just didn't happen that way. So I think that I don't think about it at all because I'm more interested in what I'm doing now.
Yeah, perfect. And do you, as a writer, think that what you write now, it's not better? The word's not better, but you're more, I don't know, you're growed in these years making comics.
Well, it's interesting. You always tell yourself that the stuff you're doing now is the best stuff you've done, and in
Yeah.
some ways, it's really important. It's really important to think that the stuff you're doing now is the most vital, and this is the stuff. This is the stuff. So sometimes it's quite odd when you read something that you wrote years ago, and you haven't read for a long time, and like say recently, Enigma was re-released, and Enigma is a real kind of like a groundbreaking story I did for Vertigo Comics. And it had a superhero in it, but it had a gay superhero and it had a gay theme running through it. And it was quite groundbreaking for its time, and a lot of people really loved it. And for a lot of people, it really means a lot. And Dark Horse have recently brought out a really lovely um, a publication of it and a reprint. And it's really beautiful. So I read it again, and it's quite odd because you think, oh, that's not too bad actually. So you like to think that what you're doing now is so much better than what you've done before. But then you read stuff you had before, and you think, well, that wasn't half bad. That was okay.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
Sometimes, obviously, you read stuff and you think, I wish I could go back in a time machine and change some things.
Yeah.
Think that but that's normal. That's normal stuff.
That's perfect. You can write a comic book that a writer takes a time machine and back to write his own scripts again.
Rewrite the stuff he wrote earlier. Uh, yeah, that's. I mean, I think we need a bit more than that to make a story. I think, but yeah, I think also if you could go back in time, perhaps it wouldn't be stories that you would change; it would be other relationships you would change. But I think that story's been written
Yeah, that's
hundreds of
perfect.
times
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, and you says a lot about vertigo, right? That is important.
Well, it's
Uh,
you were talking about the British invasion, and I think that the British
yeah,
invasion and Vertigo are very very much connected, and I think that you can't really mention one without mentioning the other.
yeah, that's perfect. And do you miss this vertigo times when there
No,
was a vertigo?
they were great times, and it was fantastic. We don't
Yeah,
miss it because you try to make your life now equally
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Yeah, because we at least we in Brazil when Vertigo ended, we were just said, and for a writer that worked the a whole part of career with HellBlazer, for example, uh, I think it's very oh my God, Vertigo has ended. That
Yeah, you know what? To be honest, I think that Vertigo stopped. Vertigo had stopped being the Vertigo that I worked for a while. So I think that even though it ended, I think that in my kind of view, like what they were publishing, obviously it's what they were wanting to publish, and that's great and it's fine, and things change. But for me, like the Vertigo that the kind of stuff that we were doing at Vertigo were no longer being published at
yeah,
Vertigo. Because that's fine, and that's fine. Times move on, people want something different, and I think that things don't stay the same. That's some intrinsic nature of life and reality, is that things don't stand still.
yeah. For me as a reader, I can see that I think that Vertigo was made for don't be the mainstream, and at belong the years it turned mainstream, you know. So I think it,
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it tried to be a little bit more mainstream, and it just became more mainstream. And yeah, I mean, who knows? But
yeah,
I think it ceased to be what it was originally. But of course, it ceased to be
yeah,
that because different personnel, different. They were trying to do different things, so
yeah,
it's changed. Change is good, and change is inevitable.
yeah. It's inevitable because it's more the publics are different belong the years now, right?
Well,
So
that's right. I think what the public want might change. What a right might change. What the editors want. So
yeah,
it's fine. That's all cool.
yeah, that's it. So let me see. That's okay. So still about your
What were you
career.
looking at then?
I'm sorry.
What were you looking at then? The time.
No, to the questions.
Oh, okay, okay.
The time, it's okay for
No,
me.
no, no.
I'm just
It's fine.
looking at
It's
the
fine.
question because I need to
Okay.
remember. So about your career again, it's not about your comics specifically yet, but I heard once that in an interview that you like to write the script very descriptive, so the drawers can do exactly what you envision it, and that even more you like to think about what the turning of the page will be like. Uh,
Sometimes I like to be descriptive, but not prescriptive. Um, by that I mean I like to give. I like to have a real clear idea of what I'm seeing. But an artist's job is to be an artist. So if they've got a slightly better way of telling a scene, I'm always open. I'm always open for changes. As long
yeah,
as I get the idea, as long as I think that the artist is really kind of like understanding what the scene's about and using art to in service to the story, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
Rather than
yeah,
sometimes every now and again, an artist might just change things for the sake of it, change things because for the sake of it. And I think, have you actually read the script? Every now and
yeah.
again, you think that you haven't read the script closely enough. Usually, the artists I work with are all fantastic. So if they change something, it's because also there's a difference between describing something and drawing it. Sometimes it's just like I ask for something to be possible, or there's
Yeah.
a better way of doing it. But I do like to have a fairly, every beat or every panel has a good description. I like breaking it down into panels, and I am aware of the page turn. So I think
Yeah,
it's something in the armory of a comic book writer, or the comic book. It's something that the comics have, that films don't have, and novels don't have, that visual turnover.
yeah, that's perfect. And when you work with the turn page, when there's let me think what I want to the moment when something hidden needs to be revealed in your process. How do you create the tension for how something will be presented on the next page?
Well, exactly as you've just said it. I mean, I'm writing a story at the moment. I don't want to go too deeply into it, but a character meets death or meets a version of death, and
Yeah,
it's in the past. So it's going to be a past idea of what death is, and we do have this person's kind of praying to God, but it isn't God, and there's a voice. So the final, it's kind of like he sees a shadow on the wall, and then the final panel of that page is just we go close into his face, his features, and there's a voice saying, "Come on, turn around." And so that we then
yeah,
can turn over the page, and we're kind of living it with the main character. So we're experiencing it in a kind of subjective way. The page gets turned, and we see what the character sees, and it's
yeah.
just a way of dramatizing and getting closer to the main character's personal subjective experience.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of the points that made comics being the most important, the most nice media to see. Because in the movie, they create the tension, and that is the climax moment, and okay, that's it. And in a book, if you turn the page, you have to still read
Yeah,
until
obviously,
the tension.
what movies have movies control time.
Yeah.
So when you see a movie, the movie controls what you see and controls the time. When you read the comic book, you don't control time, but you do control movement.
Yeah. Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, instead of novels, they have something. What novels have is, again, you control the time, but also you don't see anything. So everything you see is in your imagination. So it's another kind of.
Yeah.
So these three, I personally think that all three kind of art forms, film, novel, and comics, they've got some real good strengths.
Yeah, yeah, and that's interesting because movies has a vantage. I don't know if this word exists. It's not that
Right.
this word. Yeah, vantage. Okay, that's it. That is the soundtrack, and the soundtrack can make you feel.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Maybe,
comics don't have it, and still can make up for
well,
me.
maybe that should maybe there's another kind of comic book that would be, maybe in maybe in the future when you have a comic and when you open onto a certain page, it will be playing music.
Yeah,
And when you turn the page, it will change the
yeah,
music.
yeah.
So the technology will be there.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think it's very interesting because we each time more we have this, these
Yeah, but
recurses
yeah,
to
you
make
know
a
what? The technology will be there to kind of make this reading experience. Well,
yeah,
probably what's
yeah,
going to happen is that you'll open up the page and the things will be moving around on the page.
yeah,
But,
yeah.
but
I still prefer to read a very good comic book, physical, but we have this
well, yeah,
tendency of
because you have the words and art. I mean, I think to me that's what drew me to comic books. Just
yeah,
this real, it's a real kind of like old thing, pictures and words interacting. I think there's something really simple and really kind of amazing about that. It also feels
yeah,
quite. It also feels just quite ancient in some ways. Just this side. I mean, like you go back to cave paintings. Okay, they didn't have words, but they still had these kind of people were still kind of very interested in these narrative imagery,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
had
That's
meaning.
perfect.
They had
Yeah,
meaning.
that's it. Yeah, it's the most important part, I think. This meaning, right? And
Yeah.
let's talk about Namor now. That
Oh,
Namor, despite being okay, did you
yeah, yeah, yeah. The Submariner.
Namor, despite yeah, despite being one of the first Marvel characters, doesn't have as many relevant stories. You, along with Azad Ribic, had the merit of making one of the most important stories of the character on the last years. And so, how was the process of this project? Did Marvel
Okay, well,
ask for you, or
first of all, uh, I'd noticed that how how Namor was being treated in Marvel comics at that time he was quite a jokey kind of character. He was
yeah,
just almost goofy, and he had this kind of like goofy kind of quality. And I mean, I didn't read comics much when I was young, but I do remember seeing Namor or seeing Submariner, and I always thought of him as a quite spooky, kind of scary character, quite
yeah,
mysterious. This creature that looked quite um, uh, had this kind of quite beautiful kind of face, but quite interesting. And he lived under the sea. So to me, there was something mysterious and spooky and dark about him, but that wasn't how he was being portrayed. So I was interested into a story where I could use the Namor that I imagined he was when I was a kid, and that's what I did. And so I did a story that was, based a bit on, based a bit on the Heart of Darkness, and going down, and then have a real story, and what a story that's a real, if you pardon the pun, depth. It was a story about the depths
yeah,
of sea, and the depths of a man, and the depths of and you go deeper and deeper into this main character and you find out more and more, and you go deeper and deeper into the sea and you find out more. And Namor represented, if you like, the dangerous, dark, deadly spirit of the deep sea. It's
yeah,
simple.
yeah. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I have to say, I have to stop the interview quickly. Uh, to me, hearing you talking about comics, it's been wonderful. It's I feel like I'm in a master class. You know,
Well,
that
good. Yeah,
that's very nice.
you're gonna get a bill after this, you know.
Yeah, I can read I can write a great comic book. I can stop and bah, write a
Yeah,
great comic. So
good.
let's talk about Hellblazer now. That is, you are one of the authors, if not the author, who worked more with the Hellblazer title. And Alan Moore says that he has seen John Constantine in real life in a bar. And do you think this character has a such strong persona that he stopped to being a creation and start to being a creature?
I think there were John Constantine types.
Yeah,
I think he's really close to being an archetype, and I think that there are that type. So I am not surprised that Alan has seen him um, in in a bar. So I think that if you were going to see him, a bar is the place you'd see him. Clearly,
yeah, 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 yeah,
I think you're more likely to see him in a bar than in a church.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, so look, it's yeah. So what's the question about Neymar about Hellblazer?
Yeah, and what's your relation with the character? Be okay, you worked with him a lot, but what's the relation that these years writing this character built, to you in your heart?
Well, I think that one of the things about John Constantine is that some really great writers had already written him, and a number of writers had worked on him. So when you come to him, you really have to say what do I have to say about this character that's going to make it worthwhile me writing? And what have I got to say about it, and how you don't try to make him different for the sake of it, but by dint of thinking, what part of John Constantine can I find that is more interesting to me and will therefore make it different from the other versions of John Constantine. And I think that, so when I was going to write a Hellblazer, when I was going to work John Constantine, someone said to me, all you've got to know about John Constantine is that he's a bastard. And I sort of thought about
Yeah,
that.
that's it.
But then I thought, well, actually, that's not right. And actually, I've known a few bastards in my life, and John Constantine isn't a bastard. I think there's something quite gentle about him. I think that he does things which are bastardly. I think he does things which are messed up, and I think he
Yeah,
screws up people. I think he's sometimes dangerous to be around. But I think at heart, I don't think he's a bastard. I think that
yeah,
if he's a bastard, I think it'd be a very different book. And it'll be a very boring book as well. I think what makes him interesting, or made him interesting, was, if you like, the conflict between these strange dark powers he has, which mess people up, and something in him which was not a bad person. And I think
yeah,
that I see him more like Philip Marlowe, a man who must go out onto those mean streets, who is himself not mean. And I think he wasn't mean, but the stuff he was dealing with, this magic, was very mean.
yeah,
And I think that, which is why I then kind of brought in this character, Epiphany, and had him kind of getting married and kind of having a love affair with this girl who was half his age, and because that kind of, I think that also displayed a kind of a vulnerability in him, and I think it's always
yeah,
quite interesting. And I think that always quite interesting to think about a character's vulnerability.
yeah. And so
Yeah.
you did he gave him a heart as a character because
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's what I was looking for. I mean, that's what I was looking for. Yeah.
that's perfect. And was it hard because as you said, before he was just a bastard, and you had this intention of give him a heart. He
Yeah.
was
I think I don't know. The trick is to add the stuff that you're interested in adding, whilst keeping him the same character. And I think that the reason why Constantine has this idea of being like an archetype, or had this idea of being like a real rounded person, was because every writer that worked with him thought what they wanted to say about him. So there is this sense of he has a number of different aspects. And I think that that's quite true. And I think that human beings tend to have more than one aspect to them. I think they tend to have, different versions of themselves. They tend to have different sides of themselves, and I think
Yeah,
that this is what lent John Constantine a certain verisimilitude is the word. I don't know. It meant a certain realism, which I think he felt like a real person because he was contradictory. And I think
yeah,
sometimes people can be contradictory, and I think that's why he worked. Yeah.
yeah. Everybody in real life are contradicted, because
Well, to a greater or lesser degree, yeah. And I think you go through times in your life when you do contradict yourself, for sure.
yeah, because we are real persons. That's
Yeah,
it's impossible to someone be 100% mean or 100% good.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
Yeah. So I'm going to the last questions. I have more too.
Okay. Thank
Eh,
Christ for that.
So so this one is about American Ronin that
Okay.
tells about a man who gets tired of the damn system he lives in, dominated by huge corporations, and decides to fight against this system. He basically someone who is class conscious in the real world. So where does your desire to talk about politics came from? In a comic that at the same time as has action and police footprint, and how do you know how to balance all these points in the narrative?
Okay. Okay. There's probably about 5 questions to that question, but
Yeah,
I'll start off. I'll start off saying that I think the idea of these corporations, these giant corporations that control the world. I mean, it was interesting during the time of COVID that you saw, if you like, the limitations of these nation states, of these kind of like elected democracies. And I
yeah,
think you did see how certain like corporations, and I think you're seeing it now more and more, how these corporations straddle uh, boundaries, democratic boundaries. And so these unelected corporations whose only function in life is to turn a profit. And I think you do see kind of them more and more kind of like these huge mega corporations, straddling democracy and really controlling stuff, and how they can probably bring down governments. I'm sure they can bring down governments or alter elections, and that's what happens. And then we are starting to see it. So it was a kind of, on one hand, it was a kind of this world which I thought I could see coming. And I thought I'd been really, you'd get an even clearer glimpse of it during the time of COVID. Um, and I then wanted a character who allowed me to enter this world and allowed me to talk about this world in a certain way. So I wanted a character who was a part of this world, but not a part of this world. A
yeah,
character who was of it, but not of it. And I
yeah,
think that was the character. Yeah. I thought
yeah,
there was some interesting stuff about the character that made him quite unique. I liked all the stuff about empathy. And I like the fact that, most heroes, most comic book heroes or action heroes, their powers are very kind of outward. They're very kind of like violent, and they're very kind of like, they're very much about hurting people or bashing people or throwing stuff out. He was all about bringing stuff in. He was all about being able to understand what makes you tick. And I thought that's quite an
yeah,
interesting, excuse me, there was quite an interesting kind of change from the normal kind of hero in this kind of book. It was kind of a James Bondy kind of book, but
yeah, yeah, perfect.
his powers, excuse me, his powers were empathy. His powers were understanding what makes you tick, and
Yeah,
and I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, you can
yeah,
still do the other stuff as well. You can still fight if you needed to, but his real thing that made him different,
yeah, yeah.
made him different. Excuse
Do
me.
you want to give a break to drink a water?
Tea. I think it's okay.
Tea, of course.
Yeah.
London. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I have a coffee here, but now it's cold.
Well, I do
So
drink. Yeah, my tea's pretty tepid as well. Yeah. So I
yeah,
think
so
that's what made this. I mean, I sort of think that the two things that I liked about uh, American Ronin was the world that I was creating, which I think was an exaggerated form of the world which is happening now anyway. and this character who had this ability to empathize with people. And I think that was quite an interesting twist on what these superheroes normally have.
Yeah, perfect. That's it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting, Mr. Milligan. Before the last question, I just have to thank you because for me, this is one of my favorite interviews that I ever made. Not just because it's with you and I like a lot of your work, but because you answer the questions with the heart, and it's very nice to hear it. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Hopefully there's a bit of head there too. But
Yeah, that's perfect. So the last question is again about writing comics. And to end this interview, what builds a good comic book writer in your opinion? Is a writing smart story, a story that resonates with the masses? How would you describe a good comic book writer?
oh fucking hell! What makes a good comic book writer? Someone who believes in what they're writing.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, perfect.
Perhaps.
So I don't want to that I don't know. You can answer as you want. Are you? And I don't want. I want that you answer with
Okay. Okay.
honestly. Are you a great comic book writer?
Oh, look, who the fuck knows? I mean, I think I have my moments. I think I have my moments when I think that this is really good stuff, and
Yeah,
sometimes you think it's all right. But I think that's normal.
that's okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
as all careers, right? You have your moments, and you don't have,
Yeah, I
and
think
that's
you,
it.
you try to have more. You try to have more good moments than bad. But I think I've produced some unusual stuff. I think I've got. I think I've not tried to be most popular, and I'm not. But I think I have. But I think I've tried to be true to something. And I've tried to do something that's different. I think that I feel as though I'm kind of. Uh, I didn't grow up with comics. I mean, it wasn't my kind of love, and even now, it's not really my love. So I think that it's kind of, and I feel as though there's both a strength and a weakness. Perhaps I don't understand comics as much as some people, but also I think I bring a fresh approach. That there's someone that
Yeah,
is immersed in comics don't have. So yeah,
that's perfect. Yeah, Mr.
okay,
Milligan, thank you
good.
so much for
Well,
coming.
good.
That's it. Do you
Good.
have something to tell about for your Brazilian fans when you come back? We missed
I
you.
look, I look forward to that. I look
I
forward to coming
really
back.
hope you come. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
If
we
someone
need
pays me,
to. Yeah, I will send some messages to come
pays me,
back.
pays my airfare. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
perfect, Mr.
okay. Okay,
Yeah,
but,
thank you,
okay. Good conversation. Thank you, and good luck with your interviews.
thank you so much, guys. For who don't know, Mr. Milligan, he's on the Facebook. Do you use social media with frequency
Yeah, I've
or
used Twitter. Peter Milligan.
Twitter? Yeah,
Yeah, what is my Twitter thing? It's it's almost Peter Milligan. It's my handle
it's almost
is
Peter Milligan.
yeah, it's it is it's ridiculous. I don't even know what my
No, that's
Twitter.
perfect though.
Yeah,
There's no
it's
problem.
it's it's Peter Milligan or something. Yeah, if you look up Peter Milligan, you'll find it.
No, that's here. It's right in here, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Milligan. Thank you so much,
Okay. All
and
right.
that's it.
Okay.
That's
Good. Bye.
bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much, Mr. Milligan.
I'm not going.